Most people think BYD just makes cheap electric hatchbacks. They have no idea the same company also builds a $230,000 hypercar that jumps off the ground. From a $10,000 city car all the way to that, here are the 6 levels of BYD, from cheapest to most expensive. Coming in at roughly $10,000 in China, the Seagull is BYD's entry-level car, and the machine that proved an electric vehicle could be genuinely cheap without feeling cheap. It's a tiny urban hatchback built around BYD's own Blade battery, and even at the very bottom of the lineup it already tells you how BYD thinks. They weren't trying to build something flashy here. They were trying to build something affordable, practical, and almost impossible to ignore. The Seagull costs less than a lot of used cars do, which is the kind of price that makes rival automakers spit out their coffee, because for years everybody else insisted a cheap EV just wasn't possible yet, and then BYD walked in and did it. In some export markets it shows up dressed a little nicer and renamed the Dolphin Surf, landing around 18,500 pounds in the UK, but the core idea travels everywhere. What makes the Seagull so important isn't the spec sheet, it's that it never feels punished for being cheap. You still get a modern cabin, a usable touchscreen, and enough real-world range to handle daily city life without anxiety, which is exactly the part rivals could never figure out how to do profitably. The Seagull wasn't just BYD's cheapest model. It was the statement that started everything, and it sets up the most important thing about this company, which is that they can build something dirt cheap and something completely unhinged under the same roof. Going a step higher, next comes BYD's mainstream family, the Dolphin and the Atto 3. Starting at about $30,000, the Dolphin is BYD's compact hatchback for the person who doesn't want anything exotic. They just want a normal, practical electric car that doesn't require financial gymnastics to own. The Dolphin makes up to 204 horsepower and offers up to around 427 kilometers of range on the WLTP cycle. And like everything BYD builds, it rides on that safe, long-lasting Blade battery. It isn't trying to thrill you, it's trying to make EV life feel obvious. It's the kind of car you buy when you want something easy, efficient, and cheap to run, with none of the drama and none of the range anxiety. Then there's the Atto 3, known as the Yuan Plus back in China, and this one matters far more than its modest price suggests, because the Atto 3 is BYD's global bestseller outside of China. At roughly $40,000, the Atto 3 is a compact SUV with genuinely useful space, vehicle-to-load power so you can run appliances straight off the car, and its signature party trick, a central touchscreen that physically rotates between portrait and landscape, like the car can't quite decide whether it's a phone or a TV. The Atto 3 is the model that actually put BYD on the map across Europe, Australia, and beyond, and it's the one that turned BYD from a curiosity into a household name. The version worth knowing about is the longer-range Atto 3, because that's where you get the bigger battery and the most usable everyday range. That's 2 levels done, and now things start getting serious. Climbing higher, the next step up is BYD's flagship mainstream lineup, led by the Seal. Coming in at around $45,000, the Seal is a sleek premium sedan built as a direct shot at the Tesla Model 3, and it's the car that makes people do a double take and ask, wait. This is a BYD. In its performance all-wheel drive form, the Seal makes around 530 horsepower from an 82 kilowatt-hour battery and launches to 100 kilometers an hour in the high 3-second range. That's half 1,000 horsepower in a sedan that costs about as much as a loaded Camry, which is the kind of math that keeps Tesla executives awake at night. And the cleverest part is the design, because the Seal genuinely looks expensive, with clean, ocean-inspired styling that wouldn't look out of place wearing a German badge for double the price. This isn't some cheap car trying to look fancy. It's a properly handsome sedan that just happens to undercut everything around it. Sitting above the Seal is the Han, BYD's executive saloon, with around 380 miles of range and the kind of presence aimed squarely at the Model S and the BMW i4. Then there's the Tang, a 7-seat large family SUV with dual motor power for people hauling kids and gear, and the Sealion 7, an electric SUV built to take the fight straight to the Tesla Model Y. Between the 4 of them, this single level covers almost every shape a normal family could ever want, from executive sedan to 3-row hauler, all with that same quiet, premium feel. This whole level proves BYD can do fast, roomy, and premium feeling while still keeping regular person money on the table. And the version worth knowing about across the board is anything with the dual-motor all-wheel drive setup, because that's where these cars stop being sensible and start being seriously quick. We're a third of the way up the ladder now, and from here, BYD stops wearing the everyday badge entirely, because above the BYD name sits an entire second company. A solid step up in both price and prestige, and about a third of the way up this list, the next level is Denza. Denza started life back in 2011 as a joint venture between BYD and Mercedes-Benz, and it's now fully owned by BYD, which means it's the brand the company uses to chase BMW, Mercedes, and Porsche money directly. That sounds ambitious until you realize Denza isn't just slapping a fancy badge on a normal BYD. These are properly different cars, with their own design language, their own showrooms, and their own personality. Even the naming is a flex, because the Z in its hero car stands for the highest letter in the alphabet, and the number 9 signals prestige in Chinese numerology. The volume seller of the brand is the D9, a luxury 7-seat MPV that starts around the equivalent of $47,000 in China and sells like absolute crazy. Because it turns out a lot of wealthy families want a Mercedes-grade living room on wheels. But the Denza everyone talks about is the Z9 GT. Coming in at around $39,000 in China and €115,000 in Europe, the Z9 GT is a tri-motor shooting brake making somewhere between 870 and 962 horsepower depending on the version. Sized right up against a Porsche Panamera, and it hits 100 kilometers an hour in about 3.4 seconds. The headline trick is its rear axle steering, which lets the whole car crabwalk sideways and pivot almost on the spot, like a crab that went to finishing school. Add frameless doors, a DV-outlet sound system, dual refrigerators built into the cabin, and flash charging that refills the battery from 10 to 70% in roughly 5 minutes, and you start to understand the pitch. Where a normal luxury car gives you leather and a badge, the Z9 GT gives you party tricks the Germans simply don't have an answer for. There's also the N9, Denza's flagship 6-seat luxury SUV, making up to 920 horsepower, hitting 100 in 3.9 seconds. And over the top enough to include an on-board drone system, plus the N7, which was the first BYD-built car to get LiDAR and proper city-assisted driving. Denza basically is BYD saying it can do German luxury, but with party tricks the Germans don't have. That's 4 levels down, 2 to go, and this is where BYD gets weird in the best possible way. Climbing higher, and now about 75% of the way up the list, comes Fang Cheng, a name that translates roughly to Formula Leopard, and it's BYD's personalized, professional-grade sub-brand built specifically for off-road and sporty buyers. This is the brand for the person who wants capability and image, not just efficiency. It's sold through its own dedicated stores instead of regular BYD dealerships, and in Europe, its models get rebadged under the Denza name as the B5 and B8. The first car is the BY5. Priced around $40,000, the BY5 is an off-road midsize SUV with proper old-school body-on-frame construction sitting on BYD's dual-mode off-road super hybrid system. And it makes around 687 horsepower in China from a 1.5-liter turbocharged plug-in hybrid with well over 1,200 kilometers of combined range. It's the hardcore but electrified answer to something like a Defender. Then there's the big one, the BY8. Coming in around $50,000, the BY8 is a full-size off-road monster making 748 horsepower from a 2-liter turbo plug-in hybrid, while tipping the scales at a colossal 3,305 kilograms, which is over 7,200 pounds. That's more than 700 horsepower hauling 3.5 tons, which makes it less a car and more like a building that decided to go off-roading. There's also the Thai 3, a smaller and more affordable entry that's quietly become a big volume seller. The version worth knowing about here is the BY8, because that's where the brand fully commits, pairing serious off-road hardware with enough power to bully sports cars at a stoplight. The whole point of Fang Cheng Bao is to prove that electrification doesn't have to mean soft, because these are trucks that tank turn through mud, not crossovers pretending to be adventurous in a parking lot. And now we arrive at the very top of the ladder, where everything until this point was just the warm-up, because the final level is where BYD stops competing with normal car brands and starts hunting Ferraris. And finally, at the very top of BYD's ladder sits Yangwang, a name that means to look upward or to aspire to the summit. This is BYD's ultra-luxury, technology-flex brand, and it's the proof that the same company building a $10,000 Seagull can also build machines that embarrass cars costing many times more. It starts with the U7. Coming in at around $86,000 to $90,000 in China, the U7 is a super sedan with a quad-motor setup making 1,287 horsepower and 1,239 pound-feet of torque, launching from 0 to 62 in a claimed 2.9 seconds on its way to 167 miles an hour. And you can even get it as a range extender hybrid if you want. Think about that, a four-door family sedan with more power than a Ferrari from 10 years ago, for the price of a nicely optioned BMW. And if the U7 somehow still wasn't enough for you, next comes the U8. Priced around $150,000, the U8 is an extended-range EV using 4 electric motors plus a 2-liter gas engine acting as a generator, producing up to 1,184 horsepower, hitting 62 miles an hour in 3.6 seconds, and offering over 621 miles of total range. It looks like a Land Rover Defender that spent a year in the gym. It weighs around 7,600 pounds. It can perform a full tank turn by spinning all 4 wheels in place, and it can float on water for up to 30 minutes in an emergency. Read that again, because this is a 7,600-pound luxury SUV that turns into a boat. And it's a real car you can actually buy, with a longer 6-seat U8L version sitting closer to $180,000. And before you ask, no, the flotation mode isn't a party trick you're meant to use for fun. It's an emergency system designed for flash floods, where the car can keep you safe and even crawl forward across the water before you get to dry land. That's the kind of feature nobody else on Earth is even attempting. And it's wrapped inside an SUV that can also do tank turns and keep driving on 3 wheels after a blowout. And if even the floating SUV wasn't enough, then there's the U9, Yangwang's pure electric hypercar, and this is the one that really matters. Coming in at around $236,000, the U9 runs 4 independent electric motors making around 1,300 horsepower, launches from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in just 2.36 seconds, tops out at 309 kilometers an hour, and wears a full carbon fiber body. The signature feature is its Sussex intelligent suspension, which can lift each corner so violently that the car can physically jump off the ground, dance in place, and drive on 3 wheels like it's showing off at a talent contest. That sounds like a gimmick, but it's also genuinely useful, because the same system that lets the car hop also keeps it flat and composed when you're actually driving it hard. And the most outrageous part isn't even the performance, it's the price, because $236,000 is roughly half the price of a Ferrari SF90, a car the U9 can humiliate while hopping like it's got springs for legs. And then, sitting at the absolute peak of the entire BYD universe, there's the U9 Xtreme, revealed in late 2025 as a limited run of just 30 units. Cranking the combined output to nearly 3,000 horsepower with a top speed beyond 350 kilometers an hour. Built for record-hunting collectors and estimated somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000. From a $10,000 Seagull to a 3,000 horsepower $500,000 record machine, that is the same company, and that is the entire point.